Ladies and gentlemen, cabin lighting will be dimmed if you require any additional lighting.
Shalom, 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 and most importantly, peace be upon you all. Today we're doing another segment of the Spiritual Lift. Today's story is based on a lovely conversation I had with a fellow sister. So I go to pick up a sister, and I look at the picture and I see a head wrap, and I think, let me not, prejudge it, let me see. And I go to pick her up, and she's wearing a head wrap again. I'm like, oh wow, maybe this is someone who knows the history and someone who knows that they're an Israelite. So we're driving, and I think I asked her, like, how's your night going? And because she was outside with her daughter, and I said, you had a girls' night or something like that? And she said, it was her and her daughter and her grandson came into town. And long story short, she was with a family. I said, well, your daughter looks like she could be your friend. I said, you guys got some great genes. And she was like, well, thank you. And, as we were talking, and she says, I tell you, I really can't remember how the topic started. This is something that have discovered when it comes down to the Most High and when things are, connecting. And we got talking about, society a little bit. She said, if our people would just read, if they would just read the Bible, then they would know, who they are, and they would know, how things are coming to be. And at that point, I'm thinking, I said, okay, so she's using certain lingo. She says, if they would just understand what the Most High, what he wants, something like that. And I heard that, and I was like, okay. So, and I said, I don't know what you subscribe to, but I said, in the Bible, the Messiah says that the mysteries of the kingdom are for you to understand. It's talking to the Israelites. And she says, yes, Deuteronomy. And when she went there, I said, okay. That Deuteronomy tells you, that we'll be in the position that we're in. And I'm like, okay, so I have a fellow sister. We're all brothers and sisters, or family or kin in some kind of way. But I said, man, finally somebody who in a car who knows who they are. And so, we were talking about how things are, and then if we would just read the book, we will understand so much about ourselves, because ourselves are in that book. And I finally get her to where she's going, and she was asking a lot of questions. I told her that I'm not under anybody. I'm not with the camp or nothing like that. We just read it for what it is. And she goes and tells a story. She says, amongst the multitude of questions, she said, what happened to me was I was in my work office, and I was looking at flat earth stuff. And in between were these Hebrew Israelite things. So I started looking at it, and she said that I started to realize that, that they were talking about us. She said, and I just started screaming. She said, I almost to the point where I passed out, screaming and crying, because, it clicked, like, this makes so much sense, because this says a lot about our condition. And, she was talking about, do you know that they changed, the names in the Bible, they changed, gave them, like she said, American names, but they gave them, European names, Matthew, Luke, all of that. I said, yeah. And she said, do you know like Jeremiah's name is, she's saying Yirmiyahu and, you know, Jeremiah,
take
whatever.
exit 287, then keep right.
And it chuckled me a little bit. And I was like, yeah, you know, that's in there, but Psalms, you know, 83, 1 through 5, it tells you that these are some of the tricks and the trades that they will use for us to not to know who we are. You know, I said, you know, when you look at
then take a slide
in the Bible, you look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I said those are names that was given to them in their captivity. The same thing with us here now, you know, but I said they tell you that they have Israelite names. They have Israelite names. And this is a part of where we are, why, you know, we don't know. And I said, and our people, they don't know who they are because someone told them that the Bible was a white man's book, that it was a white man's religion. And what they don't know is that it's talking specifically about them, you know. And it was, you know, very impactful. But for me to also see, you know, where we are as a people in regards to where we get our information from, or who we are under that is dictating our understanding. She got on the Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning and all that stuff like that. And one day we're definitely going to do an Esau teaching because it's imperative to know exactly where that doctrine comes from. So again, like, you know, we were talking, like I said, it was just refreshing to speak with her. And at the end I was, you know, I asked her, I said, man, it's okay if we exchange information. And she politely declined. So I don't think that is a good idea. You know, I said, well, you know, I'm married, so I'm not trying to, you know, do anything. She said, no, well, you know, I just, you know, I'll be in the grocery store and, you know, men always try to get my number. And, you know, so some background for her, she has a 50-year-old daughter. Again, she has 2 grandchildren. And she was very, she was pretty. She was a pretty older woman. The head wrap always just something that just breeds righteousness. It's a natural, attractive quality and feature. It's something different from looking like everybody else. Now the difference for her too is that, you know, she had on these kind of like tight jeans and stuff like that. So she was shapely, and so what came to mind was this is like how Sarah was viewed when she was in Egypt, and, you know, Abraham had to say, hey, tell him you're my sister, you know. Yeah, I think I had to do that twice, but tell him you're my sister, so, you know, they don't kill me for you. And that's what she kind of like the presentation was something similar to of how I would envision her. But truthfully, I said, you know, even if it's for, you know, my wife to talk, because, you know, you want to be around community. You want when you find, you know, your own people, and we're around our people all the time. It's just the understanding coming out of the matrix. When you find people that has come out of the matrix, you want to just stick it. But the one thing too, and I could think too, is that, you know, she told me about the person that she watches on YouTube, and a part of me is like, you know, she don't want to deviate from what she's learning, because that is an important part of how she came to her identity. And she asked me this, and I'm gonna finish up with this. She asked me too, like, do I know what the Most High's name is? And I said, you know, based on Psalm 68 and 4, you know, it says his name is Yah. You know, now people may say Yahuwah, Yahweh, and she said that she was looking. I think she said she was looking at something and the person said that his name is Ahia. And she was like, I listened to it, but I just couldn't cling on to that name. Something that seemed right. And she said, and this is where I look at almost the Christian entity of us that come out of it. But
Take a slight right.
she said that she had a dream, and that dream said that he's told her that his name is Yahuwah. And I said, okay. I said, well, I subscribe to it being Yahweh, because in the Bible it says that when he's talking to Moses, he says, tell him that I am sent you. And I said, I am is Yah. If I am is Yah, and it's I am is at the front of the name and the back of the name, so Yah has to be on both ends of it. And Ha, Yahya, Ha is like he. So Yahya, he who creates life, he who is life. Yahya. So, but I said, I meet you where you at. Whatever you call him, it's Yah. You're saying Yah no matter what. Ahaya, Yahuwah, Yahweh. I'm beyond the titles. I'm beyond that. I told her I'm beyond the title. I'll meet you where you are. You say Yahya, cool. I know who you're talking about. And she said, I can't get with the, I can't read. We talked about the Bibles. I got 3 Bibles. I have the King James. I have, she has the Sefer, and she said she has another one. I said, you should look at the Hallelujah scriptures too. Told about that. And I said, well, I read the King James. She said, I can't do it with the Lord and the gods and all that stuff. And I said, what I do is I just change out those for what I know. And I said, I do the King James because for our people who are bonded to those religions, this is the book that they read. And so they're not going to have the Sefer. They're not even going to have the 1611 Bible. They're not going to have that. So for me to come at them and says this Bible says this, it's already starting a division. Those Bibles are for your own personal knowledge, for what it is that you want to read, or what it is that you want, to do. So and your understanding. But when it comes down to if I'm talking to a Christian, we're talking the Bible, the majority of them are only using one. So I have to meet them on their level. I had to meet them where they are. And I need to know the book that they use. And so that's what I told her. But after that, I said I had to go pick somebody else up, and I would have loved to have gotten her number, just so we could fellowship together. Because that's one thing that we need to do. But it feels like that she's heavy into learning and who she's learning from. And the key thing for me to take away from that is, and this is the spiritual lift, is sometimes when we are dealing with each other, it is imperative to not always look to correct. What is imperative is that we see our people coming out of the matrix, coming out of the struggle and journey of Christianity, coming out of Islam, coming out of religions, but following the Most High to the fullest. That is one of the key things that I took away from that conversation, and to lift her consciousness on, we have to meet our people where they are. So if we can do that, if we can meet our people where they are and not focus on, you know, certain names, and I gotta get better at it. I hate the name Jesus. I hate it because I know where it stems from, and I know what it means, and I know the trickery in it. But our people love the name Jesus. That's all they know. And so if I wanted to reach our people, I'm not going to get caught up. I'm not going to say it, but I'm not going to get caught up because I know what they're trying to ensue. I know what they're trying to provide as their insights and why they believe what they believe and who they believe in. She made a good point. You know, she said, you know, people over here, they're worshiping Jesus. They worshiping a pagan God. I said, yeah, absolutely correct, but they don't know that. They were taught and forced. That's what I'm telling her. They were taught and forced in slavery to be Christians. They were taught and forced in Portugal and in Spain to be Christians. They don't know that. They don't know that history. So unless she wants to, or unless you want to make that known, you know, you have to meet them where they are. And that is a rude awakening that they're not ready for. So don't focus on it. So that was that conversation. And I was very, very, very glad to have met the sister. With that, I say shalom, 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 and most importantly, peace be upon you all. Study to show yourself approved to Allah. Hallelujah.